Good afternoon from me and another video from Project Ruby. This time I will be replacing what you could call the rag joint or a steering coupler. I've heard it called both names. In my case, as you'll see, it's completely gone. So you're turning the steering wheel, driving casually, and it will bind up. And obviously I don't need to say why that's a bad thing. So notice how there's no blind splines in this, and that basically means that there's one of the splines is fatter or it's missing one. Basically it's a sort of keyway that tells you basically you can't put it on in a wrong direction. This I can put on, one tooth off, a bunch of teeth off, or just kind of wherever I see fit. I want to try to match what's on there already, because odds are it was right before it, the rubber rotted away from it. So I'm going to be putting a chalk line on the steering gear and try to line up this bolt for the same orientation and hope I get it pretty darn close. So before I get started, this is a vacuum canister reservoir for the cruise control and HVAC. I think it runs both, but I'm not 100% sure. Either way, it just kind of snaps on here, so you can just pop this right off and set it aside. And then I have taken the master cylinder off already. You may not necessarily have to, but it is going to give us more room. And then I just unplugged these back two spark plug wires for ease of viewing. Here is just a quick shot orienting you with how I'm looking at it. To help keep this in the same alignment as the original part, I am basically going to go by the center of the bolt and put a chalk line on the steering gear of where that center of the bolt was, and then line up the new one to the same orientation. So I'm going to start with taking off the pinch bolt on the gearbox. Next, I'm going to pry it off the gearbox. So I had to get on this by hand and wiggle it back and forth to get it off. Going to mark the splines with the chalk, just in case that turns. And I removed 3/4 inch bolts that hold on this rubber cover, and so we squish it back. You can see there is a U-joint here with another pinch bolt that I can use to take this off so I can actually access it on a bench. So I'm going to lock the steering wheel somehow and take this off. We'll attempt to get a camera angle on that. There, that bolt right there, it's pressed into the U-joint, or the yoke you could call it. I put the nut back on it flush with the end of the stud and then hit it with a hammer till it broke loose. So now I will take the take the nut back off of it and then punch it the rest of the way through. So I finally got this steering shaft off from underneath the steering column with a bunch of whacking. It was really kind of seized on there. This was originally down when the steering wheel was straight. Then I whacked it a bunch, couldn't really get it off, so I ended up just flipping it over 180 and then whacking it on the other side. Ended up popping right off. Bolts shaped just right, it doesn't really come out. So I'm gonna have to go to the bench, grind off this tab here. It looks like it's a rivet, so I'm going to grind that off and then pound this dowel, I guess you could call it, out. And then that will allow me to put these bolts that will replace it. So I've had some mental notes. Under the car, under the dash, this bolt was down and the steering wheel was straight ahead. And then this pinch bolt for steering coupler or rag joint was straight up when the steering wheel was straight ahead. So I need to make sure I put this piece on in that orientation. So I have my new unit here almost ready to go on, and I did run into an issue. So these bolts that this part comes with, they go like that, simple enough, right through here, and as you can tell, there is not really any threads. And if you do tighten this down and just squish the rubber, you get maybe 3 threads, more like 2. Now that's just not right. So once again, I went to the hardware store. So I got same thing, 5/16 bolt, just longer. Oh, almost forgot the sleeve. So get you oriented. If the front of the car is that way, under the steering column, this bolt was facing towards the passenger side. And, well, with the steering wheel straight ahead. With this part, the steering wheel straight ahead, this bolt was going up. So this needs to be oriented this way. So I made a mistake with this. This bolt does not turn, and when I took it apart, this nut was on the passenger side of the steering column, you know, the easiest place to get at it. So basically I put this on 180 degrees off because now this bolt goes up, and that's not the way that it came apart. So I'm going to go ahead and fix this off camera and meet you back under the car. Part of me would say you can't really over tighten this, but the main purpose of that sleeve, it's a little bit thinner than the rubber, so basically it's giving it clamping force on the rubber, but when it gets tight, that sleeve is going to be taking the force of the clamping, so you can't just squish the crap out of the rubber and have it split apart and out and everything. So you get a really good grip on it, but without ruining it. Before I crawl under here, I took the pinch bolt out for the gearbox so I wouldn't have to fight it later. And I turned this steering wheel 180 upside down so I could hit this a different direction, or tap it on a new side, and that's what ended up getting it loose, you know, that rocking motion. I'm gonna turn it back the opposite way that I turned it the first time, and then lock it. Pull this rubber boot back. And feed it through. wasn't quite done under the dash. I forgot to press record when I came under the hood. I thought I would get the splines on the gears started and then go back under the dash and fix that. I got one of these pry bars. The end of it's angled. I pried on it right here and then back, and that got it back far enough to where I could get it started on these splines. And I'm gonna have to do the same thing going forwards, I think. The wheels are slightly turned to the right, so I'm gonna aim for having the steering wheel just slightly to the right, and we'll hope our alignment's correct. But with the assistance of a pry bar, I was able to get this whole steering shaft pushed back up into the dash. So now I have the spline started. So I'm going to go back under the dash and put that nut on it to keep it from coming back out. The proper way to do this is to put Loctite on it, but I don't have any right now. I'm pretty sure I've done underneath here, so I'm gonna put the screws back in for this boot. So I am having a hard time getting this thing on the splines. Might just keep prying on it until I get somewhere. So I ended up having to take the boot that covers the steering column from under the dash off again. I should have learned my lesson the first time. I ended up putting a big pry bar on the end of this right here, but from under the dash, and hitting it with a hammer to get this to go on the splines. It's fairly rusty, pretty tight fit. I have it too far, so I'm going to pry it back until I can see the notch on the inside of the splines that the bolt needs to go through. Once again, you should put Loctite on this, but I don't have any. So we're just gonna go with it. I don't know what the torque spec is for this particular bolt, but I just have a regular old short ratchet. Just gonna go a little bit tighter than snug. Call that pretty good. In my specific situation, I had this master cylinder over here dangling by the lines for probably close to a month, between me actually getting the parts for this and taking it apart and, you know, life happening. It leaked brake fluid out of the front of this. So I'm going to drive this car outside now and rinse this off with water so this doesn't rust or corrode anything any further. Lengthy process of a title for it. The oil is way over full. Just doing a basic fluid check. The oil, I'm sure, needs changed. Oh wow, I know the engine's not running, but it shouldn't be that full. Needs changed anyway. That looks like butt. But this water's gonna look like poo. Actually looks pretty good. Okay, bright green and clear. Okay, weird. Power steering, perfect. And a leak some brake fluid. But it's got plenty to not get air in the system, so I'm gonna ignore it for right now. It only leaked because I had it dangling by the lines. It leaked out of here, so it's not leaking, just the seal, so it's fine for now. I haven't charged this battery for months, so it probably crank twice and die. Not tightening these down in case I need to tear them off quick for electrical fires. So I can't do any test drives with this just yet because I don't have insurance on it. Licensed and registered, but not insured. But if you like this video, or if it helped you out in some way, feel free to like and subscribe. Okay, this car has not been attempted to been. Wow, this car has not been attempted to have been started in a couple months now, and I closed the hood and didn't charge the battery. So let's see what happens. We're gonna need some help. So, if you know carburetors, these particular 2150 carbs have a vent here and here. Well, you can put fuel down this. Got my flammable brake clean. You can see it coming out of the other vent there if I spray it too fast. Hopefully that'll be enough to get this thing running long enough so it can suck fuel out of the tank. First try. Just a quick side note too, I did make sure I had brakes before I put it in gear because I had the master cylinder off of this. It is not happy with me.